Tender and worthy be thankful unto the Most High, Mother, Father, Creator of the universe. Kudzai Modzimo Mokoro. Give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Fahodie, African liberation, African power for all African people. This is ShakaRa, and welcome to the very first edition of the Pan-African Question. Yeah, the Pan-African Question. And as you've heard, the first question is, are you a Pan-Africanist? Or more specifically, am I a Pan-Africanist? And I thought it would be important to start with this specific question because I understand that not everybody would be familiar with Pan-African ideology. And today, there is a whole heap of confusion, yeah, about what Pan-Africanism is and what it means and what it stands for and so on. So we're going to get into it a bit now. There is definitely a need, yeah, for more definition in today's world in relation to what Pan-Africanism is and what ideas it stands for, because I would be the first to say that it has been so watered down to the point whereby almost anybody and anything can claim the terminology and apply it to what they're doing. And many people who have identified as Pan-Africanists, yeah, have got to the point whereby they're questioning whether that we should continue to use the term. So to answer the question, am I a Pan-Africanist? The answer is yes, but I am a very specific kind of Pan-Africanism. I am what is referred to as a Garveyite, yeah? Or as Marcus Mosiah Garvey defined it, African fundamentalism. I'm an adherent of African fundamentalism, i.e. Black liberation ideology as expressed through the words, deeds and actions of Papa Garvey, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and the UNIA-ACL, the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. Yeah, there are different types of Pan-Africanists, and that Pan-Africanism is often referred to today as Black nationalist Pan-Africanism, Black nationalism, as I've already said, African fundamentalism. Another prominent form of Pan-Africanism comes through the legacy of the Asajefo, Kwame Nkrumah, and Sekou. Adherents to that legacy would be referred to as Nkrumahist Toureists. There are many relationships between the two, yeah, but there are some differences, yeah. Whereas Papa Garvey, or those who adhere to that legacy, would be referred to Black nationalist Pan-Africanists, the Nkrumahist wing would often be referred to as socialist Pan-Africanists, or sometimes today revolutionary Pan-Africanists, yeah. And there's a reason why that the emphasis is there, partly because Nkrumah was key in clarifying for us what this thing called neo-colonialism is, which around the world, our majority Black nations are governed under neo-colonialism. We'll probably do a session on neo-colonialism in the future, but for now, what it really means is that the political philosophy of majority African nations is governed by the economics, yeah, of our former colonizers, the criminals who had previously colonized us. And so we are experiencing neo-colonialism, which is not a substantive change in the world power order or the colonial system. So for an Nkrumahist, yeah, the Nkrumahist defines Pan-Africanism as the total liberation and unification of Africa and all African people under scientific socialism, yeah? Now, when you see scientific socialism, this is an economic philosophy that goes against the neo-colonial order, right? Evidently, scientific socialism is heavily influenced by the Marxist ideology, okay? Then I'm going to give you another definition now, which comes from a more nationalist Pan-Africanist or Black nationalist Pan-Africanist leaning, and that definition is as follows. The total liberation and reunification of Africa and all African people, and the establishment of one continental and global African nationalist government and a Ma'at Ubuntu world order. This is because the nationalist sensibility tends to reject socialism. Not necessarily because it is full of negative ideas, but because the Black nationalist seeks to define and solve the problems of African people according to the culture and the experiences of African people. So for us, socialism or Marxism and communism are ideologies that come out of European culture to solve the problems of Europeans, all right? So not to say that there's no good ideas there, but we don't define ourselves according to those ideological dictates, yeah? We want to be able to create a situation where we're able to learn from our own culture and our own experiences and develop those ideals. So that's where terminologies like Ma'at and Ubuntu come into context, because Ma'at being an ancient African Nile Valley Kemetu terminology, which relates to concepts like truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, reciprocity, and order. And Ubuntu is a terminology that speaks to peoplehood, yeah? What some people define it as humanitarianism, but that's kind of, it's too restrictive a definition, yeah? It's insufficient language, right? But it relates to human relationships and being part of a community. As the saying goes, umuntu in the Zulu, umuntu ungabantu. A person is a person because there are people, or I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. So that term, Ubuntu, gives expression to the dominant social principle within indigenous African life. And so it's about developing those ideas into a modern context in ways that we will be able to liberate ourselves and these things. Where this plays out primarily is the class versus race and culture question. The socialist or the Nkrumahist prioritizes or sees class contradictions as primary, yeah? The black nationalist sees race and culture contradictions as primary. That doesn't mean, yeah, that the class analysis from a Pan-African perspective is absent a consideration of race and culture. And it also doesn't mean that the race and culture analysis from a nationalist perspective is absent an analysis of class. The difference is that whereas the socialist sees class as universal in terms of the development of human society, and therefore making the class contradiction primary, the black nationalist does not see class as universal. The black nationalist sees class as a product of culture. And even if class contradictions may exist in various societies, the cultural dynamic would mean that all class contradictions are not the same and therefore cannot be remedied in the same way. But the socialist, yeah, says, well, actually, class is a fundamental aspect of the neo-colonialist structure, and we have class contradictions living among us as black people right now, even though they say we are independent. The black nationalist says, yes, that is the case. However, those class contradictions are simply a byproduct of the fact that we have a European culture manifested in the political and economic systems that are used to govern us. So the class contradiction is simply an outgrowth or a product of the cultural contradiction, yeah? In other words, deal with the culture question and the class contradiction will take care of itself. The socialist says, not necessarily, yeah? We could manifest class contradictions among us indigenously, as we may be able to identify that such contradictions may have existed among us pre-colonially. The nationalist says, okay, even if that is the case, yeah, you know what I'm saying, we should be able to use our own culture to solve those problems from our own perspective and not swallow Marx and Engels and Lenin and Trotsky as though, you know, Europeans are the only people that can really develop economic and political theory, yeah? That's just a brief rundown of some of the debates that take place over the years. However, many people often overlook the extent to which there has been synthesis and learning, yeah? You know, and those ideologies will come closer together over the years also. For example, and I know because I'm a born black nationalist, Pan-Africanist, and I've seen the debates over the years, but it would be true to say that that from a black nationalist or cultural nationalist perspective, many of us have had to learn about the importance of having a definitive analysis of capitalism as an economic system and how it functions, yeah, within our own societies, and how the world economics is run under that system. That's a fact. That the socialists have emphasized that point, and many of us as nationalists have learned, yeah, of the importance of that point. And what the nationalists has given, yeah, and the socialists have learned from the nationalists, whether they admit it or not, is that the importance of culture, yeah, as a defining factor within liberation and revolutionary politics, yeah. That is a gift that the black nationalist has brought to the movement. Now, as a Garveyite, there are many people among the Garveyites, and this is actually a very current debate, that say that we should not be identifying as Pan-Africanists, yeah?